All right, every Monday we take a look at what your lawmakers are up to on both sides of the river. And today we begin in Des Moines. It's Governor Kim Reynolds' final year in office, and Republicans hold a majority in the state Senate and House. So here to break down the bills they're considering right now is Dana Searles of our sister station, WOI in Des Moines. All right, Dana, I want to start with a bill that's getting a lot of public and media attention right now. It would ban students at public schools from using their student ID from accessing books and resources at local public libraries. It would also stop libraries from bringing bookmobiles onto school property. What are the arguments for and against this?
Yeah, Shelby, so right now there are a lot of schools that do partner with public libraries, basically allowing students to use their school ID as a library card at any public library. Des Moines Public Schools is a big example of that here in central Iowa. So what this bill would do is, like you said, it would sever those partnerships. It would not allow for that to happen. And right now, Des Moines Public Schools is making an argument, a lobbyist for the schools is making an argument saying that there are some of their schools that don't even have libraries in their schools. So they do rely on those public library access for certain aspects and certain things like that. However, those for this are saying that this would allow to sever that gray area, that gray line of a law that was signed into law a couple years ago, which bans books from schools depicting sex acts. So this will prevent that access to those public libraries for those students to get access to those kinds of books that are currently not allowed in the schools. So to kind of break it all back down, tie a bow back on it, right now those schools that are against this say they really rely on those public libraries because they don't have that access in their own schools. They don't have libraries in their own schools. However, those for this bill say it would protect students from having access to those books that depict sex acts, which is now a law. Schools were required to remove those books from their school libraries.
Yeah, of course, this all ties back to the 2023 book ban that was placed in Iowa that got rid of thousands of books off of the shelves. That includes books like 1984 and The Kite Runner. But another bill that is moving through the Iowa House right now would require AI developers to put in age verification measures and a lot of other restrictions for young kids. So what's the goal of this bill?
So the goal is to basically try to regulate children's access to different types of AI. So like you said, it would require those AI chatbots to have an age verification system in measure. So if kids are going to be on these AI chatbots, they need to have that certain age verified. Also, these chatbots that provide mental health support to students, they would need to submit peer-reviewed data showing that the program is safe. Wanted to look at my notes to make sure I have that all correct there. So a lot of times there are people that use that mental health access for those chatbots. So this would help regulate it. It also would limit the amount of information that these AI chatbots are allowed to collect. So overall, kind of three big regulator things, 3 points that I just pointed out. But one thing I do want to note about this bill, right now there are a lot of undecided lobbyists on this bill. So we don't exactly know quite yet the argument for and against this bill. I think the biggest thing right now for this bill and the age verification is to protect those minors from certain risks with AI. But again, like I said, a lot of undecided lobbyists. I think there were maybe only one or two for and against. So that's one thing important to note, that this still could have a lot of development as it goes throughout the legislative session.
Well, like we said, it's Governor Reynolds' last year in office, her last term, and she's introduced a bill that would stop local governments from having different civil rights protections than the state. So what's the main concern here?
So basically, in last year's legislative session, Governor Reynolds signed a bill into law that removes gender identity as a protected civil right under the Iowa Civil Rights Act. Now, there's been a bunch of local government entities that are trying to implement those protections for gender identity and bringing those protections back. Some places that have done it are places like Coralville, Iowa City, Davenport, and then closer here to the metro, places like Ames are trying to implement this. So basically, these local governments are trying to add those protections back for those that aren't protected under the Civil Rights Act. And this bill would basically stop that. It would not allow those local governments to set those protections specifically for any trans and non-binary people from discrimination. Now, one thing to note is that those against this believe that this would just remove local control. It would take away from the local control. However, those for this say this is just a direct impact of what is already in the law. So something that'll be very interesting to watch. I do want to know that I believe it did pass through the House, and it is eligible for debate on the House floor.
And before I let you go, Dana, we spoke last week about pipelines and this years-long fight over eminent domain. I want to put that to the side for just 1 second because another separate bill would say that any carbon dioxide that flows through Iowa through these pipelines that are being heavily debated would be taxed. What's the breakdown here?
Basically, the breakdown is those pipelines would be taxed, and this bill would say that those taxes would go directly into the state's revenue fund that would be added to the taxpayer relief fund. So this bill has nothing to do with eminent domain, simply the taxes that would be surrounded by those carbon pipelines. Some people think, it's just a one-off to, have a little bit of a distraction from the big eminent domain debate. Others say this could be a good benefit. So we'll have to see what happens to this. But this is, kind of a smaller bill compared to the carbon pipeline eminent domain debate, but definitely, a branch of that debate that is kind of happening right now at the State House.
Absolutely. Dana, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate this.